Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Geezerology Roundtable. We're going to continue with our look at the discography of the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And today we're going to discuss Electric Ladyland, which was the third and final studio album by the Jimi Hendrix Experience. It was released on October 16th of 1968. It was recorded over 4 different sessions in July and December of 1967, and in January, and then in the spring and summer of 1968. So this wasn't just, you know, go in and record an album. These are recordings that were done over the sporadically over the course of a couple of years. This album was produced by Jimi Hendrix. Chaz Chandler started the work on it, but he left pretty early in the process because at this time, Hendrix was taking more control over things. And Chandler was getting a little frustrated with Hendrix's perfectionism. Hendrix would want to do a lot of takes over and over and over again, and Chandler got a little frustrated by that, and Hendrix was bringing a lot of people into the recording sessions to work with him, and it got a little chaotic. So Chandler called it a day, and so this became strictly a Jimi Hendrix produced product. It was credited to the Jimi Hendrix Experience. But a lot of this is not just the trio playing. There are a lot of folks who came in and did some session work. There's some jam sessions here. And in fact, I think Noel Redding, the bass player, only appears on about half of these tracks because he also was not happy with the way Hendrix was working this. Before I turn it over to my colleagues, I just wanted to say, I've mentioned before in a couple of earlier videos that we did on Jimi Hendrix Experience albums, I made the statement that there are no great Jimi Hendrix albums. I go back and forth on this one. Half of this is a double album. There are 4 sides to it. It's 73 minutes of music, 74 minutes of music, and half of this is great music. There is a 14.5-minute jam session on side 1 that's not the Jimi Hendrix Experience. That Hendrix and Steve Winwood came in, and some other people came in, sat around in the studio and just went on a jam, an unrehearsed jam. It was just all improvised and everything like that. And you know, it would be cool, I think, to sit around and see that happening, but just listen to this on record, it's just I find it pretty boring and annoying. So there's 14.5 minutes there. On side 3, we have about 14 minutes of just Hendrix doing just playing around with a bunch of studio effects, and that pretty much takes up the bulk of side 3. So you take that all in total, that's about 30 minutes of the 74 minutes of this album, and that's close to half of this album that I think could have been tossed out. If you would have taken side 2 in this album, side 4 of this album, and a couple of shorter tracks from the other sides and put them together in one album, this would have been probably one of the greatest albums ever made. But to me, it's tough to listen to this record because there's just so much stuff in here that I want to skip over. So it's tough for me to call this a great album because of all that extraneous stuff that is there. I know that there's an audience for this stuff. I know that a lot of people love this stuff, but personally, I don't. And that to me, that's just kind of my explanation of why I said before there is no great Electric Ladyland album. The general consensus is that this is a great album, and it's made a lot of all-time greatest lists and everything like that. But I just told you why that I have a hard time calling it a great album. Hendrix's rock and roll songs, you know, the 4-minute, 3-4 minute songs that he does on here, they're just fantastic. I mean, they're some of the greatest stuff that came out of the late 60s. Side 4 especially it starts with Still Raining, Still Dreaming, House Burning Down, All Along the Watchtower, and Voodoo Child Slight Return. I mean, that's as good of a album side as you're ever going to find anywhere. And side 2 isn't too far behind that. It starts off with a Noel Redding tune, Little Miss Strange, which is okay. It's fine. There's nothing offensive about it or bad about it, but it's okay. But then you get into some really good Hendrix stuff with the songs Long Hot Summer Night. He does a cover of an Earl King song called Come On Part 1. And then a song called Gypsy Eyes and a song called Burning of the Midnight Lamp. Just great Jimi Hendrix stuff. Great stuff. And then, you know, there's a couple of random things elsewhere on side 1. Have You Ever Been to Electric Ladyland and Crosstown Traffic are 2 pretty good short songs. They're both just barely 2 minutes songs. So, you know, they could have taken those 2 and squeezed them onto either side 2 or side 4 maybe and done away with side 1. There's a 3.5 minute song that begins side 3 called Rainy Day Dream Away. And then you get into about 14 minutes of Hendrix's studio wizardry there, which could have been tossed. Anyway, this is a great bunch of songs for Hendrix to go out on. But I have a feeling that if Chaz Chandler would have been there and helped him do a little bit of editing, that this might have been a much more artistically successful album than it was. It's still critics and historians still rave over this album. You know, it's commercially it's always, you know, it's always sold very well. So just take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. This is just my personal tastes on this, is why I have an objection to this. And I don't know, maybe my 2 colleagues might have a different take on this stuff. So I'll turn it over at this point to Dee.
Okay, thank you, Scott. And for the most part, I would have to concur with your observations. In fact, you did pretty well. But yeah, there's some gems in here. And before I go too far over on that path, Electric Ladyland may be the quintessential psychedelic album of that era. I mean, you know, was psychedelic. Maybe some people say it started in '66 and kind of it was done by early '69, and I kind of believe that. You know, other bands of that era that were considered psychedelic, but Electric Ladyland, I think because of it's a double album and because it was a time of experimentation, you know, this is what we got. We got some absolute just gems. Just, you know, Hendrix takes you on this sort of a stratospheric journey to the outer limits of what can be done with an electric guitar in studio. And so he was experimenting, you know, using the studio as another instrument like other, you know, bands of the era, you know, primarily the Beatles. But yeah, you had mentioned the sort of the discipline of Chaz Chandler certainly wasn't there. Yeah, you read the accounts where once he left the studio and didn't want anything to do with it, that I believe I came across a quote from Noel Redding. He said it was, instead of a recording session, it was like a big party. There'd be, you know, 10, 12 people in the control room. And he said it was just, you know, Jimmy wouldn't kick anybody out. And which led to talk about the one sort of extended jam. That was a result of, I believe it was The Scene, but I'm not 100% on that. It's where a lot of musicians would go to hang out, listen to other musicians, and just have jam sessions. And I read where Jimmy's idea was he wanted to recreate the feel and the sound of a small club. And so, of course, there you have Steve Winwood on it and all this, but it is kind of a sort of a rambling, indirect, I don't say, yeah, just kind of a rambling jam, not a whole lot of structure or purpose there. Maybe he just wanted to jam with people that he, wanted to play music with. But on the other hand, this album just has some songs that are, as Scott mentioned, they're definitely in the classic rock upper echelons, upper tiers of productions. And some of my favorites, I mean, everybody is familiar with Crosstown Traffic, Voodoo Child. I like Rainy Days, and some of the, even Electric Ladyland, which I think he exhibits some different styles in here. There's some funk, a little bit more up-tempo funk, which maybe reflected his time with the Isley Brothers. And then you can even make a case for maybe a little jazz rock fusion that he was experimenting with on this album. Let's see. I like 1983 for what it is. Another definitely, I don't want to say experimental, but definitely kind of another out of this world song for me. His, of course, he had a knack for taking covers and making a whole new music experience out of it. With Bob Dylan's All Along the Watchtower, just an unmistakable, great production. And on that album, he did have, in fact, on this record, he had at different times 3 members of Traffic make their contributions. Chris Wood doing a little sax, Steve Winwood keyboards, and then Dave Mason plays acoustic guitar on All Along the Watchtower, gives it that full sound. But I think to listen to this album, all 4 sides from start to finish, would kind of have the effect of scrambled eggs. You have to pick out the gems in this and sort of just set aside the other stuff, which, Hendrix was experimenting. I believe that on this some of these other tunes, I just would have to say, nah, I've heard it once and that's enough. Yeah, this would have made a just tremendous 2 sides concept album. 4 sides is a little much for me, but I'll go back to it every now and then if I want to revisit psychedelic music at its best. And yeah, and of course, I think for guitar players, this is another one of the albums that they'll point to as being landmark, iconic, and launching, I don't want to say pseudo imitators, but influence other people down the line.
Well, we have the rare occurrence where you and I agree on something, Scott. I think the album suffers from a lot of filler type material, and the album is in my vinyl collection and has been for a long time, but I didn't listen to it that much because it was such a pain in the butt back in the days of turntables, because there was stuff I didn't want to have to endure. So it was constantly getting up, moving the tone arm. So I just kind of gave up on the album after a while. It's much easier to listen to now, if I'm on a digital music thing, because I can just hit skip real easily. And when the album first came out, it did not set well with critics. And they kind of had the same thing, that it's kind of a mishmash. That's changed over the decades, and now it's hailed as a masterpiece. And I kind of have to wonder if it isn't maybe more of a nostalgia thing for Hendrix. But anyway, there's some absolutely fantastic material on here, but there's a lot of filler, and I concur with you totally on that. And so I'm going to get into a little trivia about the album that I uncovered that I think is kind of interesting. Whitney Houston's mother, Emily Houston, who was a member of a group called the Sweet Inspirations, sang backup on Burning of the Midnight Lamp on the album. And on the awesome Crosstown Traffic number, Hendrix used a homemade kazoo made out of a comb and cellophane to kind of complement his guitar work. And the 15-minute blues jam, Voodoo Child, I think Dan kind of alluded to this. Hendrix was hanging out at a club in New York City called The Scene, and he encountered Steve Winwood and Jack Cassidy, and they go back to the studio and they jammed on that number, did 3 takes, and that was it, and it went on the album. And they later added some crowd noises to make it seem more like of a live cut. And Hendrix, with his obsession for perfectionism, supposedly spent about $70,000 in studio time, which today is the equivalent of around $578,000. So yeah, Hendrix needed an editor. And I agree with you. If Chandler hadn't walked out, and if he could have kept rein on Hendrix, we might have had a much tighter, much more comprehensive album. So I do concur. I think there's filler on here. There is brilliance, and this is a definite thing where you need a mixtape of Electric Ladyland, you know, and to pick out the best stuff and to kind of avoid the filler. Lyrically, I think a lot of these songs are kind of weak. Sonically, there's a lot of great sounds on here. The very first cut, and the Gods Made Love, to me, it's just sonic garbage. And in fact, Hendrix was quoted as saying, yeah, we knew there was going to be a lot of controversy over that, so we made it the first song to get it out of the way. And Noel Redding's Little Miss Strange, worthless in my opinion. He's not a good singer, and it's just, it's pablum in my opinion. All Along the Watchtower, of course, you know, is classic Hendrix, fantastic version of Dylan's song. You know, Dylan even acknowledged it himself. And Dylan on a lot of concert tours actually kind of copied Hendrix's version of his own song. I think it's kind of ironic that this turned out to be the best-selling album of Jimi Hendrix Experience, despite, you know, I think its shortcomings. And you know, the debut album, Are You Experienced? I can listen to that in its entirety from beginning to end. The subsequent follow-ups, you know, I think they both suffer from Hendrix's excesses, and it's wonderful for him to experiment, and he gave us some music that nobody else has ever been able to equal in terms of experimentation and taking rock music, you know, in some new directions. It's a great album if you know, pick out those top tunes. And I agree, Scott, this would have made a fantastic single album. As a double album, it suffers from Hendrix's excesses. So that's my opinion.
Just to follow up on a quick point, you got my head spinning when you mentioned that Whitney Houston's mother, Emily, sang on Burning of the Midnight Lamp. So I did a quick little scramble here, and I found out, because Whitney Houston's mother was Sissy Houston, right? But then I went and looked. Well, Emily was her given name. Sissy was just a nickname. So, okay, yeah. But I know on Axis Bold as Love, the first track on that one is one of those goofy little studio things. I don't remember, was Are You Experienced, did that also start out, was that way? I don't remember.
No, I think it started out with a straightforward, I don't think it had that.
Oh, okay.
I think the big difference between this is Are You Experienced made Hendrix a superstar, and then it's like, okay, we got to let him do what he wants to do, you know. And Are You Experienced, with him being brand new, I think maybe they were able to exert some control over him. That's a personal opinion. Maybe he was able to get away with, you know, his obsessions to go explore and for perfectionism, because, you know, but no, to my memory, Are You Experienced started.
Yeah, I just like the first track on Are You Experienced is Foxy Lady. So yeah, but so yeah, I guess probably what that all about is that was pretty much, Are You Experienced was pretty much just a straight ahead collection of you know, Jimi Hendrix songs produced by Chaz Chandler, And I know Axis Bold as Love is where Hendrix started taking a little more of a hand in how things were being done. Hendrix wasn't credited as a producer on Axis Bold as Love, but we do know, we certainly know that Hendrix was taking a little more control over what he was doing, and sort of, you know, he's I guess he was kind of learning things, and Chandler was, you know, was giving him a little more freedom as it went along, you know, and then but to the point where you know, there was a complete displacement by the time they got around to recording Electric Ladyland, right? Dee kind of made a point there, and I should go ahead and acknowledge that. Basically, what I don't think Dee said it directly, but it was kind of reading between the lines of Dee was saying that in its time, this, and I'm going back and remembering, and that wasn't such some of those things like the big jam session and the studio experimentation and things like that. I think that probably worked better back in 1968, you know, and it sounded better to our ears in 1968 than it does now. Now it hasn't aged well, is a good way to put it. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm listening to it with different ears in the 21st century than I did in the 20th century, which probably makes it sound, some of these things sound a little more annoying than they did back in the day.
Now that is that's one place where you and I are going to diverge. That 15-minute version of Voodoo Child, I love it, you know, because I'm a blues rock guy, and to me that's just, you know, some master musicians, you know, going in there and having a great time and showing their versatility. So I can listen to Voodoo Child and still enjoy it, but you know, I'm more of a blues rock guy, I know, than you are, Scott. So that one I can still listen to.
Well, it's not, you know, I don't really know if that blues rock. It's just a bunch of guys just sitting around and noodling. I mean, there's no focus to it. It doesn't go anywhere.
No, I disagree. I don't.
Okay. Well, that's kind of what you know, more heavy blues can be sometimes, I guess.
You know, you got,
okay.
You just got to pick up the music, let the music pick you up, and flow with it.
But okay. All right, I'm not going to get into that debate.
You're going to lose.
Dee, any more thoughts?
Not really. Although, yes, this was the last Jimi Hendrix Experience production. His next albums after this, I guess, Band of Gypsies, and I thought it showed him going in a more funk direction. But I'll stick by what I said. I think this is the quintessential psychedelic album of its era, and I think you have to embrace it in that vein. So,
well, yeah, I guess Band of Gypsies was a live album, was with a different band that he put together and a different sound of it. But I guess that was released before when he was still around.
Yeah.
So. So yeah, but Electric Ladyland, the last studio album released when he was still alive. Band of Gypsies, yes, it was released when he was still alive. And then after Band of Gypsies was The Cry of Love, which was some studio material that he left over after he died. So The Cry of Love is when the posthumous stuff started. And he was working on another studio album when he died, and he left a lot of material. He just built a new studio, and he'd been doing a lot of work, and then he took a break from recording to to go to Europe to do a couple of festivals, maybe do a little tour or something. That's when he died. And so he did leave a lot of studio recordings behind in that new studio that he worked in. And those recordings were released in 1971 with A Cry of Love, and then with another album called Rainbow Bridge. And then after that is when all the live material started appearing from the vaults. So anyway, yep, Jimi Hendrix Experience, 3 albums, all 3 of them landmark albums, all 3 of them are classics of the period. You know, I will call them classic albums, but yeah, but there's some very good stuff there. There's some very bad stuff there too. I'll just leave it at that. It's, you know, it's like if you go in and pick and choose, you can put together one hell of a playlist with these 3 albums, right? Well, thanks for listening, everybody. That's our take on Electric Ladyland by the Jimi Hendrix Experience. We'll be back over the next few weeks with some more roundtables. We're going to get into the Guess Who. We'll return to the band. We'll return to Blood Rock. We'll return to Creedence. That's all coming up. And we'll also do some reviews, mostly on Fridays. But yeah, hit the subscribe button and keep checking us out. We'll have some more good stuff for you. Thanks, everybody.